Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Bader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hey, podcast listeners, Jason here. In this episode, I had the opportunity to speak with John Tragiai, former president of Keeprs. Keeprs is a law enforcement distributor based out of St. Cloud, Minnesota. Now, this is one of those fascinating distribution niches that I really never knew existed. And trust me, one of the coolest trade shows I'd ever been to. I enjoyed my time working with John several years ago, and, it's just so fantastic to catch up with this guy. Anyway, I enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you will too. This episode of Distribution Talk is sponsored by InSQL Distribution Software. InSQL is a fully functional distribution-based software package. I say distribution-based because that's important. Many alternatives out there say they do distribution, but they really aren't very good at it. They're generally watered-down manufacturing packages with a few distribution features tacked on. I only recommend software packages that were purpose-built to serve distribution, and these folks do it very well at a price point many smaller distributors can afford. If you're ready to step up to a fully loaded, scalable distribution package at an affordable price, look no further than InSQL Distribution Software at www.insql.com. That's INXSQL.com. All right, John. Hey, it's great to see you as always, and thank you for joining me on the show.
Good to see you, Jason. It's been a long time.
It has been a long time, my friend. It absolutely has. Well, a number of years ago when I came out and found you here, you were one of these odd distributors. I never even knew there was an industry in police equipment distribution and that type of thing. So if you wouldn't mind, one of the things we love to do on the show is just, take a look at your background and how did you get involved with police equipment distribution and what drove you into this silly business?
Well, it is a silly business. Probably like a lot of entrepreneurs, planning isn't always part of the process when you get into a business venture that maybe you didn't think you'd ever be in. So I graduated from St. Cloud State University in Minnesota with a degree in broadcasting. And shortly after that, realized that I didn't want to go into broadcasting. I wanted to be a cop. And so went on towards my master's, went and got hired at our local police department and spent 8 years there, which was a great time. It was during that time, actually, that it was my first night off FTO. So first night in a squad car by myself. Training is over. Okay, John, here are the keys. Here's your gun. Go knock them out. Not
literally, but figuratively.
Yeah, okay. So I go out there, and that first night, there was an officer-involved shooting. And it was actually someone that I had worked with at the sheriff's office part-time. He had attempted to stop a robbery suspect, and the suspect shot him dead. That was my first night off of FTO, and that was a challenging night. It was a night that I really questioned whether or not I was going to stay in law enforcement. And fast forward a few years, I had a ride-along with a reserve officer, so non-licensed civilian. And he was talking. He said, "So you dating anybody?" And I said, "No, nothing serious." And he said, "Well, would you be interested in a blind date?" And I said, "Sure." Well, it ended up being that the person riding along with me, the reserve officer, was Jason Kleinfelter, who was Brian Kleinfelter, the officer that was killed, his brother. He said, "Well, meet me at my house Saturday at 7:00. So I get there, and he introduced me to his late brother's widow, Wendy. So we started dating. And it was interesting because she had just started this business with Jason and, in fact, Jason's other brother, Greg, called Keeprs. And they were going to start a law enforcement supply store. That was going to be their way of staying connected to the industry because they just felt outpouring of support after Brian was killed. And so, Jason wanted to run it out of his garage. And Wendy said, "Well, I'm not really doing anything as far as work or anything. Why don't we do this right and let's start a store?" And so they did, and I helped pound the studs or the nails in the studs for the dressing rooms, and they opened their first store. Interesting fact, they opened it before they thought about typical business questions one might ask themselves, like how are we going to get product, right?
Right. Sure.
No one would open them up. So no one would sell to them. So they ended up finding actually one manufacturer that would sell. And they got some of their product from them. All the rest of the product they got from their competitor. So they were buying it wholesale, 10, 20%, whatever, over their cost. Of course, everybody thought, competition thought they'll never make it. Well, fast forward about a year or so, and Wendy and I end up getting married. I end up leaving the police department by my own choice. Some people think that, oh, did Wendy force you? No, I was ready. Wendy and Brian had a 3.5-month-old when Brian was killed. And so at this time, she was 4.5, Caitlin. And so I said, you know what, I'm ready to take on a different life. So I left police work because they were looking for somebody to run the company. It had gotten already after 9 months, just too much for Wendy and Jason and Greg to kind of split duties, and they wanted somebody to come in. I remember the moment clearly. We were sitting in Wendy's hot tub, and she said, well, we're looking for this person. And I said, well, I'd be interested. And she said, you would? And I said, yeah, why not? I didn't know a lick about business, Jason. I mean, nothing. Yeah, so I came on, and what a great ride. 19 years of doing this from a little startup company of 1,500 square feet to 3 stores covering, 10 states from Minnesota to Georgia. And yeah, it was great. We had one full-time person at the beginning, and at the end, I think our staff was around 35. So it was a pretty great experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's an interesting story. I recall when I came out to see you, when I first met you, actually, if I recall it correctly, it was at one of those NAPED events. First of all, I was just kind of fascinated that there was actually an industry like this, police equipment distributors. I'm thinking, what do you mean police equipment distributors? This is one of those outlier industries. And actually, I stumbled upon it a long time ago. But anyhow, I had an opportunity to come and see what you all did for a living. And, I learned quite a bit, actually, about your industry. And a lot of things that, many people I don't think really understand. That everybody thinks that the agency, whatever, it is supplying all this stuff to the officers. And I think you explained to me that they give you the basics. But then, like every good hardcore, junkie, they got to get the coolest, stuff. And that's where you come in.
Yeah.
They've got to upgrade. So, yeah, tell me a little bit about that. You're a former cop. I mean, tell me how that whole thing works.
Yeah, I mean, I was buying before I was a cop, and I was in the Boy Scout Explorer program for law enforcement. I couldn't wait to go to the law enforcement supply store and buy my own ASP. Well, of course, expandable baton. Well, of course, for that, you need a holder. Well, you can't carry it unless you got a belt. Well, you need an inner belt and an outer belt. You need little things that they're called Keeprs, ironically, that hold the 2 belts together. Anyways, yeah, there's this enthusiasm with rookies, and we'll call them wannabes, because I was one, But it's a very interesting industry because, first of all, not all of the departments supply the uniforms and duty gear, the stuff that the officers need. Not all of them supply that. So some may give an allowance, say here's $500 or $1,000, and you got to go buy whatever you want with that meet within our specifications. And some departments, are great. They'll whatever the officer wants. They don't spare any expense when it comes to the equipment and the type of products that they want their officers to have. But, it's funny because you're not the first person that has said, I guess I didn't realize that the officers had to get this stuff. Well, even if the officers don't have to get it, the departments have to get it.
Right.
And they're not getting it directly from the manufacturer. There's too many manufacturers. There's sock manufacturers, boot manufacturers, shoelace manufacturers, vehicle lighting, guns, duty gear, body armor, hats, every different component as a different manufacturer. We were managing hundreds and hundreds of manufacturers. Of course, everybody wants you to buy their product. So maybe that's where you kind of came in when we were talking. I don't know.
Yeah, it's got to be a good 10, 12 years ago. If I remember, 10, 12 years ago, I came out there. And if I remember, you're like, man, I think I got too much of everything at this point. Let's clean this bad boy up.
I want to say that was also right during the recession.
It might have been.
I really think it was, because what we were dealing with was the perfect storm. And that was multiple locations. I've done several acquisitions. Now we're serving more than just central Minnesota. We're serving the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul. We're serving
Right.
all of Minnesota, starting to go into Wisconsin, Iowa, the Dakotas, Georgia. And what was happening is we were popping up these stores and we were inventorying them like we were every other store. Well, as you can imagine,
Right.
the costs go way up, right? And so we were struggling with inventory. We were struggling with management of these stores and geographical location between the stores, and then throw the recession in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember specifically you telling Wendy and I, well, first thing you have to do is you have to eliminate $100,000 from your inventory in St. Cloud. And we're like, we can't do that.
Yeah.
Well, I'll help you do it. That's where some of the work that you brought in, really helped.
If I recall correctly, you had taken on a new software package. Is that about the same time or maybe a few years later that you did that?
That was a few years later. Yeah. Because you were the one that planted the seed that maybe the software system we were using couldn't give us all the information.
It was a retail software package, wasn't it? And wasn't it developed for Chico's, if I remember right?
You are right. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Because their thought was one transaction is one unit. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, because nobody buys 6 red dresses at a time, And so in wholesale, though, it's very different. Okay, now this is all coming back to me. So.
Yeah. Well, and first, before we moved on to a new system, which is another story because it never ended up happening. They ended up going bankrupt after we spent tens of thousands of dollars. You helped us lay out a plan of what our existing system needed to do, including barcode technology, scanning and work in process codes, all these different types of things that the system couldn't do. You and I kind of worked through that and then worked with the software manufacturer and said, hey, guys, this is what we need. And I think we ended up spending, at the time, it was $60,000, which was a lot of cash for a small business, just for them to write this stuff. But it saved us, Jason.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it streamlined everything.
Yeah. And you were able to, take on some new things. I mean, I think one of the things I always thought was kind of neat was doing the installation work on the vehicles.
Yeah.
That was kind of cool. That was something a little different, a little out of the box. Nobody else was doing it. And I recall a vehicle, driving in that back bay and you all like, all right, we're going to tear this bad boy apart and I'm going to throw all the cool stuff in here. And
then put it back together and let it
That's right.
back out,
Yeah.
That was an interesting piece of our business as well. Something that once we started, we did all along until we sold the business, modified how we did it from a business standpoint a little bit. But nonetheless, we wanted to be able to provide that service to the customers.
Well, I think it was all about customization, because I mean, really, if you think back about all the different products that you had, you had the good, better, best duty holster. You had the good, better, best this and that. Then really one of the mainstays of your business originally was the apparel business.
Absolutely.
And so that's very customized. I can recall, officers coming in and getting fitted right there in the store, and then you had tailors that would deal with stuff. You had a really cool embroidery machine, if I remember right. That was awesome.
Yeah. Well, every police department, sheriff's department, every law enforcement agency wants to be just a little bit different. Everybody wants to look a little bit different. They don't want to be like the agency that's down the road. You see it a lot when you see a new sheriff be elected, into office, right? First thing he does is either change the squad cars or the look of the squad cars, or he changes the uniform. There's a reason for it. It's to let everybody know, because these are the things that the public's going to see. They want people to know that, hey, I'm making changes. I'm in office now and I'm making changes, right?
Right.
So that's the way it is for every agency in their uniforms. Some departments, they want a patch on each shoulder. Some departments want a patch on one shoulder and a flag on the other. Some departments want a patch on each shoulder with a flag on the chest. Some want that flag on the chest to be right at the top of the seam of the pocket. Others want it to be a quarter of an inch, a half of an inch, an inch. Everything is so defined that we needed a system to keep track of this, because we were dealing with thousands of agencies, and with everyone being different, we needed that system to be able to streamline that. Because what was happening is, as we were growing the business, and the business was growing off the charts, right? I mean, 9 years in a row, we made the Inc. 5000 list for fastest growing companies. It was nuts. It was out of control. And what was happening at the beginning before we got you involved was we'd keep growing and we'd hire more people, and we'd keep growing and we'd hire more
Right.
people to keep up with the work, right? Well, what was happening is we're in there growing and we're not making any more money. So that's where we had to figure out how are we going to do this differently.
That's interesting times, really. If I were to look back at what your company was all about, it was really about, customization and really, giving that customer exactly what they wanted. When they walked out the door, they were looking good and they felt good, and they were ready to essentially serve the public at that point, and really be there. So,
and our motto was an awesome experience worth sharing. Our root, and it really started with how the business was formed, right? It was a line of duty death that created this business.
Right.
It was the support by the local officers after that line of duty death that created this business for this family. It gives me goosebumps right now when I'm sitting here talking about it, because we had a genuine concern for our customers. Everybody tries to tout customer service. Hey, we're the best at customer service. We don't. We never claim to be the best at customer service. Trust me, we've screwed up plenty of pant orders and shirt orders.
Sure.
But when we explain to the customers, guys, do you think we want to screw up your order? Because if we wanted to, we wouldn't be in business, because we wouldn't have business. It's not our intent to do this. So we really had a genuine concern for the customers because of how the business started. And we tried very hard to relay that information to our frontline staff. Hey, guys, when an officer comes into our store, and they're not happy, remember, you still need to greet them with a smiling face, because you don't know what kind of situation they just came from. Did they just deal with a homicide? Did they just deal with a suicide? Did they just deal with a parent beating up on their 4-year-old kid, or whatever the case is? So you have to be able to respect the situation that they're in and maybe why they're feeling the way they are. So it was very custom, because our philosophy was all about that.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the departures I always thought was kind of interesting, and this happened a few years after you and I, started working together, is that you got into the firearms business. For a long time, you were accessories, and I got a holster, but I got nothing to put in it. You did have training guns and things like that.
Well, we had just a plastic red.
Yeah, the plastic stuff, right? But nothing cool to put in there. And then you got in the gun business. Yeah. So tell me, how was that transition?
So NAPED, the organization where we one of the best things I ever did as a business person, and I, trust me, going into business, not knowing anything, I had to surround myself around people that did. So I joined this association, and one of the best things I ever did. Not only did it, put me in front of consultants like yourself and other people that we used, but it put us in front of the top manufacturers. Glock happened to be one of them. Winchester happened to be one of them. Colt happened to be one of them. And we just, we said, hey, we're missing that. It's not that piece of the pie. We're missing that component to being able to be the full service company to our customers. No different than the vehicle equipment installs, right? Well, you can buy your light bar from us, but we can't install it. Well, that doesn't make sense. It's like saying, well, you can buy the boots from us, but not the socks, or not the shoelaces, maybe is a better.
Right.
So I wanted to expand into the firearms business and ammunition business, because I felt like it really kind of just capped everything off nicely for who we were and what kind of products we were supplying our customers. And it was a ride. I mean, it was a ride. I remember the first time Wendy, who did all of the purchasing, said, well, we have to order, I don't even know what it was, $50,000 worth of Glocks or something like that. We're never going to sell $50,000 worth of guns. We're not even in this business. We're going to get stuck with all this inventory. And who would have known that we would have been, a top distributor for Glock, a top law enforcement distributor in the Midwest for Winchester. Part of business is taking chances.
For sure.
Sometimes they pay off and sometimes they don't. This was a chance we took because I thought it made sense, and it paid off. Yeah.
Well, and I think that, obviously your past experience, being involved with law enforcement for so long and really the rest of the family being so involved with that, I think it was a risk, but a calculated risk. I think it was the right direction. And you're right. The people at NAPED, all the other, distributors, manufacturers, solid crew. I mean, I've been around a lot of associations, my friend, and, those are some really good people. I really enjoyed working with them. And okay, I mean, it couldn't have all been roses and lollipops, man. What were some of the downsides about, bringing on firearms? Because I mean, I think your protocols have to change a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, the handling of the inventory and just really some of the things that other distributors don't necessarily have to deal with.
Sure. Well, I think a lot of people are aware of it nowadays, specifically because it seems like gun control is, in our face in the media because of political reasons. And so it was a calculated decision. We probably talked about this for, I'm guessing, over a couple of years before we made the decision to do it. I think probably the biggest change for us was we now were getting involved with a line that the federal government got involved in. You're not just buying a product and selling a product. It's highly regulated.
Yeah.
Working through that was, I don't want to say a challenge, but it was a challenge. You're learning as you go. Anytime you make these tweaks to business, especially if it's something new, a new venture, it's new because you don't know anything about it or you don't know everything about it. We did a lot of learning as you go. We thought, well, we'll be able to handle it fine. We'll be able to handle the inventory. Well, of course, inventory numbers went up. Guns aren't cheap. You got to have a lot in stock. Ammunition isn't cheap. You got to have a lot in stock. So it drives up your inventory and it's lower margins. So now all of a sudden your mix is different, right? Your profit numbers are changing. None of your business is at guns and ammo margin. And then all of a sudden, a year later, half of your business is guns and ammo at that margin. So it brings up its own challenges. Staffing, having somebody that could be the go-to. So when the ATF comes knocking, you have your ducks in a row to make sure that everything is above board.
Interesting. It reminds me of like the chemical business, chemicals are highly regulated as well, and so, those types of protocols, this safe warehouse practices, things like that, the secure warehouse practice. And I imagine you had to learn all this on the fly. I mean, there was no manual for this. There was nobody that came in and said, hey, I'm going to show you how to manage this highly regulated product so easily. And I'm going to make your life easy. Nobody did this.
Well, actually, I'm going to correct you.
Oh, really?
We did not find it out right away. But again, through NAPED was the SHOT Show. And,
yes, I remember the SHOT Show, yeah.
And through SHOT Show, they have a group called the NSSF, National Shooting Sports Foundation or something like that. They have consultants on staff that if you are a member of NSSF, they will come out, I think it's for free, you just pay their travel. And they will analyze your business.
Oh, really?
Yes. So we had an ex-ATF inspector come and spend 2 days with us for free. Look at our software system to make sure the software was doing what it needed to do. Look at our inventory, looking at our record books, looking at our transactions, looking at our record keeping, looking at our history, everything. Tore us apart. Then gave us a nice little manual of all the things that we needed to improve on. And that was then our Bible. You have to, as a business owner, a small business owner, you have to be able to lean on resources. And you don't have a ton of cash when you're growing a business. And so you have to figure out how to do it in the most inexpensive ways. That's what everybody claimed that I was so good at. It's, I called myself cheap, and maybe they did too. I don't know. But you got to do what you can to find resources out there that aren't going to break the bank.
I had a interview recently with another gentleman. And he claimed to be a professional question asker. He became a professional asker of questions. He just said, "I gave up my ego, and I just that's all he did. Is just I'm asking questions."
Yes, and that is you have to ask questions. I would take a different angle to it. I didn't care about my ego. That's not the kind of person that I am. I don't mind being vulnerable and asking for help. When I first came on to Keeprs, I didn't know the difference, Jason, between AR and AP. Someone had to explain that to me, and then I still didn't get it because I was a cop,
Right.
I was a cop that was supposed to be a broadcaster.
Right.
So what do you mean AR? So you owe people money? No. Okay, we'll start from the beginning. You have to be vulnerable so you can go out there and just learn, find the resources and learn. That's it right there.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I can recall, sitting down with you and Wendy. I mean, and you were open. I mean, you were a sponge. You were ready to go.
That's right.
Because, it's like, look, I don't know it, and you do. And why don't you just give me what you got? And that was it.
Right.
Yeah. And no, that worked out really, really well. One of the things that I wanted to touch on, if I could, again, kind of going around this, the inventory, especially around ammunition. One of the things you and I had talked about before was that you had to be really careful around this, especially with allocations of product from your manufacturers, but also in times of conflict, you just couldn't get any sometimes. And then that was a real challenge.
Yeah. An agency might place an order for 10,000 rounds, which sounds like a lot. It's not. Their expectation is you're going to deliver the 10,000 rounds. The way that ammunition manufacturers work is they set their schedule out months in advance, and they do it based off of their orders. And if you don't have the orders in, you're not getting any of that allocation. And they have to do that because there are hundreds of SKUs. There are so many different types of rounds for so many different types of calibers. With so many different types of grain weights. It's not just a 9mm or a 40 caliber or a 223 round. And like uniforms, which we were just talking about, agencies are different. They want this particular round. They don't want that particular round, even though it does the same thing. So that was interesting because, sometimes back orders, 13 months, 16 months, 20 months, that's not uncommon. Not for ammunition.
Wow.
And it's not because we have terrible manufacturers. It's because there's a huge demand. But what it does is it forces you to then stock more. Because if you use that example of the agency that wants 10,000 rounds, which isn't that much ammo, and they come to you and you don't have it in stock, it very well could be a year and a half before your customer gets that ammo. That's not going to work for them. They can't wait a year and a half. They do qualifications twice a year. If they don't need that ammo next month or next week, they surely need it in the near future. So yeah, that puts a whole different spin on trying to manage that. And we had, everything from one of our uniform manufacturers. They did pre-seasons. I don't know if you remember us talking about twice a year we had to do pre-seasons, and at first it was, oh my gosh, we've got to write a preseason for $40,000. When we were in business in our later years, we were writing preseasons for $250,000.
Right.
But at the time, it's just, oh my gosh, how are we going to write this big of an order? Every manufacturer in our industry does it a little differently. Some people are your typical manufacturers, I think, where you place the order, they fill it, they ship it to you within a couple of days. That's good. But there's a lot that doesn't. Ammunition is one of them.
Interesting. Tell me now, you said you were in that business for 19 years, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And about a year and a half ago, maybe a little long, almost 2 years ago now, you decided to hang up the cleats and take the offer. Tell me, if you wouldn't mind, about that. How did that whole situation, what did you learn out of that situation? I think that's the biggest thing.
Sure. I learned that planning pays off. I remember when I first came on to run the company, and I sat the owners down at a board table, and I said, where do you want to see this company in 10 years? And they said, we want to be a $7 million company in 10 years. And I said, okay. And so I had the plan. This is how I was going to make this a $7 million company in 10 years. Part of my plan was, how am I going to set this company up for sale? That's going to be our succession plan. Mm-hmm. We all had kids, but we all made the decision early on that when the time was right, and we didn't say when that time was going to be because we didn't know. We thought when we were 55 or 60, if we're lucky, but that plan was always in the back of my head. That's what I was always making my decisions on. Yeah. And yeah, they came to us like 3 years ago. They said, hey, you want to sell? We're buying some companies up. I looked and I'm like, no, doesn't make much sense. 2 years later, they came back and they said, how about this offer? And I said, show me the pen. Where do I? And it was bittersweet. It was really bittersweet because we didn't want to feel like we were selling out to our customers. Mm-hmm. It goes back to that genuine concern that I talk about. they still hold a very special place in our heart. We very much still support law enforcement in many ways, personally and financially. And at the end of the day, it's business. And we were given an offer that we couldn't refuse. You learn so much in 19 years of business.
Yeah.
And, but when you don't know anything going into it, it's just, I don't know if it makes it more of a wild ride. It was a great experience. I mean, I wouldn't give up the almost 20 years of my life for anything. I learned so much, and we're just very fortunate. We're so fortunate to be in the position we're in right now. Yeah, we're just very lucky.
Yeah, John, I mean, absolutely. I enjoyed working with your company, over the years. You all did a nice job with that company. You did it right. You did what you wanted to do with that company, and serve the agencies and the officers, the way you wanted to. And I think that came out through the whole process and through acquisitions and through the culture that you all built there, everything. And so, yeah, well, you know what? Congratulations, man. I think, I'm really happy for you all. I mean, that was just really something pretty special. But hey, I really appreciate your time on this thing. And, I love hearing the story again and, and some of the other nuances I didn't know. Anyway, John, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Great to see you again, Jason. Take care.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider hitting that subscribe button. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area on your podcast application or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, The Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.